All right, so this one was interesting, ladies and gentlemen, because even CNN is starting to question what's happening in heavily Democrat-run states and cities, right? Especially on affordability, the very issue Democrats say they've mastered. And listen, you can't spend every day attacking Trump while your own cities are dealing with rising costs, strained budgets, and frustrated residents. At some point, you have to look inward, right? If you claim you have the playbook for fixing America, at the very least, your state should reflect that success. I don't think that's too much to ask. But instead, many of them are wrestling with the same problem they say they know how to solve. And when you have CNN, ladies and gentlemen, starting to highlight that, you know it's become too obvious to ignore. As always, if you do enjoy the content, smash the thumbs up button. That's the best way to let me know. And subscribe to the channel to stay locked in with future videos. And turn those notification bells on because, you know, YouTube, it can get a little freaky with keeping you guys up to date. Let's get right into it.
New York has been fiscally profligate for so long that the headline number, $127 billion, produces little shock. But for perspective, these are similar to the annual expenditures of a mid-sized nation with all the expenses a country requires, like Greece or Thailand, devoted to governing one city. New York City's budget has ballooned in recent years. Michael Bloomberg's last budget, adopted for fiscal year 2014, totaled about $70 billion. So in little more than a decade, the budget has nearly doubled, growing faster than inflation and faster than the city's economic growth. And much of it has happened as the city has been losing the one thing that makes big government easier to finance: people. New York City's population fell sharply amid the pandemic, with a 5% decline from April 2020 to July 2022. More recent city reports show a rebound, but the city remained below its 2020 baseline as of 2024.
And it's not just New York, but here's what happens when people and businesses leave. The bill, it's still there. It just gets divided among fewer people now. And so when the budget keeps climbing, but your tax base shrinks, what does that mean? Who ends up paying more? And so you got higher costs spread among fewer residents, and what do they get in return? Sky high rent, apartments the size of cardboard boxes, public schools that are mediocre at best, overcrowded neighborhoods, endless red tape that makes building anything new nearly impossible. That's not exactly a compelling sales pitch to move into the Big Apple, besides saying, hey, I live in New York City. But let's keep it going.
Now come the taxes, because every political argument in New York eventually ends up at the same curbside: who will pay? New York already sits at the extreme end of the American tax spectrum. For high earners, the combined state plus city income tax reaches 14.776%. Add federal taxes and the combined marginal rate can exceed 50%, reaching roughly 55% on certain investment income. New Yorkers pay tax rates comparable to European countries that provide in return universal health care, free college education, and amazing infrastructure. New Yorkers get some 300 miles of sidewalk sheds. On business taxation, the city is also off the charts. The Citizens Budget Commission reports that New York City business activity faces the country's highest combined corporate tax rate, 17.44%, once state, city, and regional layers are stacked. Mamdani wants to hike income and corporate rates even further, or else he says he will raise property taxes by almost 10%. Property taxes already made up more than 27% of the cost of home ownership in the city as of 2022, above the national average.
Now, if you guys don't remember, Mamdani was out there saying he just wanted to raise corporate tax to match New Jersey, where I used to live, right? That was his whole thing. Make it match New Jersey. It's only fair. We're New York City. But here's the part he didn't tell y'all. New York City already has its own separate corporate tax on top of the state tax. And so when he's talking about matching New Jersey, it sounds logical on the campaign trail, right? But he wasn't telling the full story, of course. Businesses in New York are dealing with layered taxation. And when you add that all up, it's the highest in the country right now without the increase. But this is the part that everyday voters don't dig into. They hear tax the rich, and it sounds good, it feels fair. But let me ask you, does that invite business growth or does it push it away? Because at some point, if I'm a company, I'm going to start to do the math. Is it worth staying? Is it worth expanding? Or does it make more sense to relocate somewhere where the burden is lighter? But let's continue.
New York is really a prime example of a problem Democrats seem unwilling to confront. Blue cities are out of control, promising more, spending more, delivering less, and pushing off the fiscal problems to some future day. Take Los Angeles, another one-party metropolis wrestling with affordability and disorder. The city's homelessness budget for fiscal year 2025-26 totals about $950 million. The LA Homelessness Services Authority reported that in 2023, homelessness was up 9% countywide and 10% in the city. And a 2024 AP account noted that homelessness has surged 70% countywide since 2015 and 80% in the city. All this amid public frustration despite billions spent. An audit reviewed $2.4 billion in city homelessness funding and found that officials could not reliably track where it went or what it achieved. Or take Chicago, with a mayor whose approval rating is deep underwater, where the pension promises are so large that they will surely bankrupt the city at some point. What is the theory of good government here? If the answer is keep adding programs, the city will keep producing unaffordability, because unaffordability is what happens when government becomes a machine that grows faster than the society it governs. Zohran Mamdani's basic instinct is correct. Focus on affordability, especially housing, but not by providing government subsidies. These only seem to have driven up the cost of rent, as subsidies naturally do.
I mean, color me shocked. Who would have thought that when government keeps expanding subsidies into industries that are traditionally handled by the private sector, eventually the taxpayer ends up footing the bill? Crazy, right? We've seen this pattern before, right? Take Obamacare with the Affordable Care Act. Subsidies were sold as a way to make health care more affordable, hence the name Affordable Care Act. And while they did lower out-of-pocket costs for some individuals through the credits and expanded coverage, what happened overall? Costs didn't suddenly shrink. Premiums and overall spending kept rising in the market. And so what happened? The burden didn't disappear, it only shifted. Because the system relied more heavily on federal subsidies, which ultimately means taxpayer dollars, right? And most of the expensive cities in America are run by Democrats, where you have all these symptoms negatively impacting people. And so naturally the question becomes, where's the value, right? If you're collecting more taxes, people expect to see it in public safety, school infrastructure. I mean, basic services at least. They're going to expect a return. But in a lot of these cities, residents are paying premium prices and still dealing with premium problems. And that's not a great return on investment. But let's jump into the next clip, because there are more people calling this stuff out, asking the right questions. Where's the money going? Like in Chicago with Brandon Johnson. Take a listen.
Let me continue here. I was watching one of your recent videos of you saying that you never told a lie. So you raised property taxes when you promised you wouldn't. You promised that crime would go down when it's not. Reports of crime is down, though, but not crime within itself. I just want to let everybody know that. Crime itself is not down. Nobody voted for you to fund illegal migrants, Brandon Johnson. Watch Dogs has recently found that we are actually $41.1 billion of debt. It's not even 1.5. So where is all the money going, Mr. Brandon Johnson? We want to know that.
All right, so you heard that. And the concern I have is that I don't know if these people actually want to go through what it takes to truly turn things around. Because real change usually means cutting back, doing more with less, being fiscally responsible, trimming government programs, that sort of thing, not expanding them. But that's not what voters are told. And Democrats do understand their voting blocks. They got the data. Analysts run the numbers. They know what people want to hear. And so they campaign on that. And then it's only after they get elected, when these progressive policies start playing out in real time, that voters begin second guessing it. Like in California, where you have Gavin Newsom, who is just awful, but somehow wants to run for president now. I don't know how he got that in his head. And Democrats will probably vote for him in the primary, and he'll run against who Republicans vote for it. But I wouldn't trust him to run a Dairy Queen, let alone a state, and definitely not a country. And in this interview with CNN, he tried to spin everything to sound better than what it actually really is. Check it out.
I do want to, while we're on the economy, ask about affordability. Because, yes, people are struggling all across the country. California has the highest cost of living in the nation. The state's prices are 11% higher than the national average. We were actually out to dinner here in Nashville last night. We met a couple from California. Yeah. They moved out of California because they couldn't afford the rent or even to buy a home and also start a family.
Yeah, we've had hundreds of thousands of people move in California the last 2-3 years. We've seen population growth.
Listen, here's what he's not telling you. For years now, California has had a negative net domestic migration. Americans are leaving the state. They're not moving there from other states. Millions have exited over the past decade. Yeah, you got some international immigration, which offsets the numbers. We know what that is. But Americans aren't choosing to live there. The trend has been outward. And when you look at the states people are moving to versus moving from, that paints a clear picture of what's going on in these Democrat states. Check it out.
Take into account the population mid-2025. Look at this. The biggest population growth this decade, all 5 of the states that Donald John Trump won in 2024. Texas, Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, and of course the great state of Arizona, where I spent my New Year's Eve. I love those folks out in Prescott, Arizona. These were the biggest gainers. The biggest gainers in terms of population compared to the 2020 census. Now, it's not just a red state boom. This is what we're looking at. We're looking at a red state boom here. But it is not just a red state boom. We're also looking at what I would dare call a blue state depression. Because who are the people? Who and where are the people moving from into the red states? Well, they're blue states. They're blue states. Take a look here. The lowest domestic net migration this decade. All 5 of the states that were won by Kamala Harris in 2024. Look at this. California, Harris's home state. New York, where I'm coming from right now, of course. Illinois, New Jersey, and of course, the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which is a bastion of blue liberalism.
As you know, we moved from 6th to the 4th largest economy in the world, and we dominate now in every key industry, from AI, quantum, robotics. We dominate in ag. We dominate forestry.
But people are struggling to afford things like your mom was.
And that's why we did $11 insulin, first of its kind in the United States. It's why we have universal health care and the lowest uninsured rate in the country, 6.4%. It's why we just subsidize over 300,000 child care slots, more than any other state in the nation. That's why 65% of people graduate from the UC and CSU with zero debt. It's why we have the highest minimum wage. For healthcare workers, $25 in the United States. For fast food workers, $20 in the minimum, $20 minimum wage. So we're looking at it from both sides. Why we have a parents' agenda that expanded paid sick leave and extended to 8 weeks of paid family leave, all to support families, to address cost of living, and to address the affordability crisis that goes back literally 70 years in California. For one reason, we're as dumb as we want to be on housing. We haven't been able to get out of our way. It explains more things in more ways and more days of what's wrong with our state. And finally, we move forward with historic housing reforms that even our worst critics, including some on the left, like my friend Ezra Klein, acknowledged were the most progressive and perhaps most impactful reforms in a generation to finally address that issue.
So you heard that, and you hear Gavin Newsom going on about how California moved from 6th to 4th largest economy in the world. Okay, and being a massive economy doesn't automatically mean your state is well run. Number 1, California is huge. Number 2, check out the location. It's great. Number 2, factor in the location. And then Silicon Valley, Hollywood, of course, agricultural ports. So, of course, the GDP, if anything, should be massive. But GDP side doesn't mean people can afford to live there. It doesn't mean families aren't getting crushed by housing costs, which they are. It doesn't mean that businesses aren't relocating, which they are. It doesn't mean that homelessness isn't a visible crisis, which it is. And it doesn't mean that taxes aren't among the highest in the country, which we know, yes, it's true. And so you can have a gigantic economy and still have everyday residents struggling. I mean, you can't even get affordable gas prices down. And Trump fixed that. Bragging about GDP while you're dealing with the worst homelessness epidemic in the country that has only gotten worse under your leadership is not a flex. But that's the update and my thoughts. Now I want to hear from you. Smash that thumbs up button. That's the best way to let me know if you enjoy the content. Subscribe to stay locked in with future videos. And as always, until next time.